Over 1 billion people worldwide suffer from neurological related disorders, and the options for therapy are very limited. Over 2,000 neurological clinical trials start each year just in US alone. Yet it's estimated that only 5.9% of phase 1 neurology drugs are likely to get FDA approval.
So of any of the disease areas we work in, neuro is absolutely critical that we have neuroimaging techniques.
Neurological disorders and why we need the biomarkers has different reasons. One is quite apparently that the brain is not easily accessible. You cannot like nicely draw a biopsy or obtain tissue. It's not visible from the outside, which is plain, but still obviously a problem. We have the brain barrier, that meaning whatever happens in the brain is not easily monitored even by drawing blood or getting access to it. So you would have to get access to at least CSF by finding out what's going on.
Tools like MR and PET, for understanding, brain disorders, has, really provided us an unparalleled ability to, characterize disease and to evaluate the role of our treatments.
I think it is obvious that we need to address or monitor the disease from different angles using or integrating multimodal information.
I think when we look at a field, say, like multiple sclerosis, where we've actually made real progress in developing treatments, it's clear in that setting that the ability to kind of quantitatively evaluate the disease state and thus quantitatively evaluate the efficacy or lack thereof of new treatments to try to better understand in which patient subcategories the drugs are working best, et cetera, has really made a difference in the ability to move such drugs through the pipeline.
I think one of the problems, as you go through the drug development paradigm, we can be really sophisticated with what we do early. So we can say we know the molecule binds the receptor, we know that it causes the downstream pharmacology. But as we go to more complicated studies, in the fact that they are multi-center and they require large numbers of subjects, now our inclusion-exclusion criteria may not be as narrow as we had in the early proof of concept.
But it's very difficult to implant a depression into an animal or a neurodegenerative disorder. And the models we have at the moment are not really reflecting what's going on in humans. They reflect one dimension usually of the pathology and are not really sufficient. These disorders seem to be a combination of different factors that includes protein aggregation, inflammation, synaptic dysfunction, etc., that are summing up to the disease that we see in the end.
Top of the challenges of imaging, that when we go into late stage trials and being able to really phenotype those subjects is expensive and complex.
We need to go to multimodal integrative selection of patients and also follow-up of therapy effects.
The data management, the quality control, and having the analytics on top of everything is something that we found that is very, very needed in this space and can bring huge value.
When we go to later stage trials, now the challenge is for us to recruit at a global scale and get everyone on the same page. And the places where we sometimes have the very best access to technology is not where we have the best access to patients.
Application of these AI procedures. That is of course a little bit of a buzzword recently, and some are a bit fed up of always hearing of AI. But we can see that the potential.
Take some really complicated techniques where we understand people really well, and then what can we do to simplify that? And again, multimodal, multi kind of environment is what's key there in terms of our analysis.
For this, I think, again, moving back to what I said before, is to standardize the data, that what we feed in these methods is valuable.
In a few examples, of course, there have been really extremely dramatic, literally life-saving events, especially with these early childhood diseases. And some of them were so devastating that even these, very cutting edge aggressive treatments, become viable in children who fundamentally have no other alternative.
There's a lot we can learn from the trials we've run in the past, and certainly finding mechanisms to share data is important. And
there's great challenges in mining, the imaging data, especially given the heterogeneity. Even within our own center, we have 10 different scanners and platforms, et cetera. But I think it's not an impossible task. And of course, the richness of that data, when combined with all the rest of the health information record, the longitudinal disease course, might really allow us to gain some insights in terms of, kind of disease classifications that could then be handed over to, Tim and his group when they're designing their next trials.
So the thing is, we would probably have to make sure prospectively that our data quality is so homogeneous and so good that we can retrospectively use this data and maybe also use it as a treasure, basically, for finding new informations, but also even with regard to approval of drugs or imaging or diagnostic tools, which is so far not the case. And from my perspective, a terrible waste of huge amounts of data.
We have this luxury of huge volumes of data, and fortunately, based on the advances in AI, although as Alex says, sometimes it seems like we just can't avoid it. But I think the reason is that the tools are really useful.
Difficult neurological disorders may have to be tackled multifactorial, from a multifactorial perspective that requires diagnosis that maybe is with regard to understanding the mechanisms involved. It may include multimodal imaging also, and even might lead to multifactorial therapies, not only monotherapies. That might also have been a reason for failure in the past.
Now we've got the opportunity for fMRI and all those functional techniques that we can standardize and help us learn more.
It's one of the reasons, why we created QMENTA, and we believe in the big power of imaging and multimodal, analysis of data and getting to insights and hopefully finding cures for brain diseases.